All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Here at Flipping the Page, we will be following my writing journey and seeing how I go from a blank page to a published novel. So if that sounds like something you are interested in, you might as well go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's get into it. I actually had a lot of fun jotting down my notes and getting prepared for this video because I have not thought about my particular origin story all at once like this ever. I don't think. I feel like the drive to finally realize my dreams just hit me really hard, and I didn't really sit down to look back on how everything has just culminated into this one time in my life, this one period in my life until now. So it was actually kind of fun to go through. But it all started when I was 8 years old. So at 8 years old, we had a writing assignment in the third grade. So with this writing assignment, we were tasked to make spooky stories for Halloween. And I believe I made something with ghosts and dead people, haunted house. I don't remember the specifics, but we had to get up in front of the class and read our stories. And I just remember that when I finished mine, my teacher, shout out to Miss Bernie, pointed out that she thought that I had a talent for creating stories and for writing, and that was the first time that it dawned on me that I could do something like that. So from about 8 to 11, I really got into the short stories and poetry and songs and just jotting down anything that really struck in a moment. Apparently I had always just written stuff down like that, like little stories, but I guess I did not become aware that I was doing it until that moment in the third grade. But 8 to 11 stories, and anytime I have a dream and I just make something up based off of a little clip that I saw in my head, or anything along those lines. But around 11, 12, that's when things started to shift as puberty. She was puberty. So that's when the sort of emo vibes and such came through. So whilst I was going through this incredible shift in mind, body, and soul, it definitely showed up in my work. And I was no longer making like cutesy little stories. You know, my stories could be a little dark for 8. So middle school me was just going through it basically. But it wasn't until about 14 years old when I would have been going over into high school, where the short story world was pulling me back in. But it shifted to where I was no longer making random things just based off of whatever I had observed or a dream. Now I had some specific story in mind that I was actually sticking to. So I would say that's what freshman year I was just concentrating more on this one particular story, and I was very much so into Avatar: The Last Airbender at the time. So I remember something about it was an elemental element, the story. I don't remember the specifics, but so now that I had something to focus on, I worked primarily on that one story on and off for the early stages of my high school experience. I still had little dabblings in poetry, or mainly poetry at the time, because naturally still an emo teenager, still that. So some things would just hit me and I would just feel the need to write it. So still dabbling in that, but I felt more of an anchor forming that was not there before. So at the time, I was also an avid reader. I got that from my mom. My mom is the biggest bibliophile I have ever known in my life. So I have very few memories of her that where she does not have a book in her hand. So I think that's just something that was passed down to me. So definitely at the time, I was now balancing this love of making something, like creating something, but also digesting just so much young adult fantasy. Now, young adult fantasy was my bread and butter, and the more I consumed, the more I felt drawn into that world, and the more I wanted to create something like that. So I am very much so into fantasy, and I love pretty much anything where it does not resemble reality. So I'm a huge fantasy reader, but that's when it was cooking. It was high school. It was between me having this my own anchor forming with my own story, but also like every single day I was reading hundreds upon hundreds of pages of young adult fantasy. So by my senior year, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. And at the time, I went to a very academically strict, I'll say academically forward, top tier magnet school. Any kind of artsy profession you wanted to go into or anything like that, it was just not as readily applauded as, say, a doctor or a mathematician. And majority of my classmates were going into, and I didn't want to get in front of these people every day and announce like I'm going to be a writer, because the few times that I did mention it at that point, it was frowned upon. Honestly, it was like, you're not going to be able to do much with that, or you're not going to have much success with that. Writers don't really make any money. I just kept things to myself. But in that mindset of still wanting to be a writer but trying to find something more acceptable, I guess, to go into, I found anthropology. Here begins the interesting part of the journey. So I went to college for anthropology. I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology, specifically because I thought that learning about different cultures and different kinds of people and evolution and such, I thought that would help to make me a better writer, which is true. That is a good route to go into. So if anybody wants to look into anthropology for that reason, it is a wonderful profession to go into, just to expand your own experience of other people and just throw you into different cultures and different mindsets that you would have otherwise never been exposed to. So I definitely am super glad that I did that. However, I fell hard for anthropology. I remember the very first time that I held a human femur in my hands, and that's when everything, it was like that moment in Harry Potter where he picks up his wand for the first time and it was all the wind and such. It was that for me. And I was just like, I need to do this. How do I do this for a living? Fell down the biological anthropology / archaeology hole. I fell down the hole. Fun, but I fell down the hole. Like I said, I don't have any regrets. I loved it so much. I still to this day love it. I got to have a lot of experiences as an anthropology student / graduate that I would have never had otherwise. The first time I got on a plane, I was 20 years old, and it was a study abroad opportunity for an anthropology class. And for the next 2 years after that, I traveled around to different countries to do archaeology work and to, dig up centuries old burials to help study someone's culture. And now that I'm talking about it, I really think that'll be a fun series, maybe, to go into all of the wild and crazy things that have happened to me as an archaeologist. So if you guys want to see, or if you guys want to hear anything about that, comment down below and I will get started on that series, from falling down snake pits and running through meth labs in the forest. And I have a bunch of wild stories. I have so many wild stories that would definitely take up way too much time for one video. So if you guys are interested in getting that video series from me, then comment down below and I will get started on that. But just to bypass all of that, too, not to get caught in the semantics, but I just had a lot of wonderful, crazy life or death experiences, just things that have shaped me into the woman I am today, honestly, and the writer that I am today. I truly don't think I could have gotten to this point where I was super stuck on making this thing happen if I didn't go through those experiences first. Because in my writing, you guys are definitely going to see a lot of the archaeology influence pop up. It is such a huge passion of mine. It is right up there with writing. It just so happens that writing came first, but it's right up there with it. I still do want to go back to school for it and do so many wonderful things for it, but writing is just one of those things. If I died today, God forbid, I would be so upset that I was not a writer, but I would not be as upset that I wasn't a world-renowned biological anthropologist. So priorities. But in all that time and all of that excitement and all of those adventures, the love of writing never left me. I still was working on that little nugget of a story, that anchor of a story that popped up when I was a freshman in high school. I was still dabbling with that and building on the characters and even making more stories. By this point, I had started an ideas notebook, which I still utilize to this day. but I will have random ideas pop up into my head or dreams. I'm a huge dream recorder. I love writing those things down because that's like, I don't know about y'all, but I have some crazy wild dreams sometimes, and I'm just like, oh, that would be a good story. But I have that ideas notebook that I started then, and I was still keeping in touch with it, but again, I was so far deep in the world of anthropology, and I just loved it so much, and I was doing such significant work that I had tunnel vision with that dream and that future. And with speaking of dreams, my dream at that point was to get my PhD in anthropology, and which we can get into this whenever I make the archaeology series. But part of the reason I got as passionate as I did is because as a minority in that field, I just got to see a lot of where the mistrust has come from over the years and how I could make a difference. To wrap up the whole anthropology side of things, that dream came crashing down naturally with something called a global pandemic. I was supposed to be applying at the same time that the pandemic came through, and when panic was the most high, those early stages. And so the applications, I only had 2 applications out there, but they fell through the cracks, and I wound up not going to grad school. And I was just so panicked. I didn't know what to do. I was like, I already had a gap year at that point working as a full-time archaeologist, and life was just on fire, as it was for a lot of people. So I got a regular job doing regular things, and at that time, I would say like a year into the pandemic, I was trying to maintain my sanity. So I got back into the writing aspect of things. Writing has always been, like I said, writing had become an anchor for me. And anytime I wrote anything, I just felt such a huge relief washed over me. I felt a weight being lifted off of my shoulders. So especially during the darkest times of COVID, when you didn't know what was going on, it was just so much craziness in the news every single day. I was like, I need to try my best to hold on to some mental stability right now. So I got back into writing, but this time I was like, I need to do something different because I can't ever finish a story. I can't bring something to fruition fully. What am I doing wrong? And that's when I was looking into structuring things better. As I told you guys in my previous video, I was a pantser for pretty much this entire origin story, as you guys can now tell. That was all just pantsing, just putting the stuff down and seeing what stuck. And it was during that time in the pandemic where I was like, maybe I should try plotting and outlining and be more structured. I thought in islands, and so I would have ideas of things and I just wouldn't know how to connect it. I would have the most amazing, incredible scenes I had ever synced in my head, and I had no way of connecting it. I had no way of fleshing out how they even got to that point, or I had no way of connecting points A, B, and C. But they existed, but there was no jump between them. So it all started with this book that I will link down below. It was called 2000 to 10,000, but it was essentially all about how to structure a story and all the things that you needed to actually plan it out and not just have islands of scenes in your head with no way of connecting them. So for the first time in, I guess, 15 years at that point, for the first time in 15 years, I actually was sitting down and thinking through things for the first time, plotting why does this character look like this, and where are they from, and where does the story take place. All these things I just was not considering before, and I was just flying by the seat of my pants essentially. But I was considering all that for the first time, so I got myself a notebook and I took diligent notes. I highlighted important stuff in the book. It became my rock to solidify this dream that I had always had, but it had just stayed pretty much on the back burner, especially after becoming 18 and entering the real world. So that was about 2021 when things started to click into place. But as we know, it's 2024. So what happened to the 3 years in between? Good question. It was more so being stuck in the mindset of I need to do what makes sense. I need to be able to pay bills and survive, and still a global illness out there. So I need to be able to get through all of that, I got stuck in this survival mode. Writing, as we all know, it's not an immediate cash out unless you're one of those super lucky, super blessed people who can post on TikTok and get a six-figure book deal right immediately. Unless it's one of those instances, this is not something where you can just write a book today, get $1 million tomorrow. So I was not really thinking about, I was working on structuring my stories better and becoming a better writer, but it was not in the way of, let me do this to jump into this career. It was just, trying to prioritize my mental and emotional health. So let me do this because it makes me happy. But I still was not thinking, let me try to make a career out of this, because it's an illness out there. I got to pay bills. So flash forward another 3 years. Yeah, it was this year that it really hit me. Flash forward 3 years, and I turned 28. I'm 28 years old, and I don't know what happened. I can't explain it to you, but something just hit me when I hit 28. And I was like, I cannot keep putting my dreams on the back burner. I cannot keep prioritizing everything else above the one thing that I've wanted to do, that I've consistently wanted to do since I was a child. So yeah, it was April of this year I turned 28, and since April to now October, I have just been putting as much of me as I possibly can into this career. I've thrown myself into it. I decided less than a month ago I was going to make this YouTube channel to keep me accountable, and here I am. And you're doing something that I never in my life would have thought. Like, had you told me at the beginning of 2024 that I would be ending 2024 with a YouTube channel, I would have been like, I would never, because this is just not my thing. I'm not a social media person. Even on my personal page and all that, I've posted once a year, if that. So to go from that to trying to pump out content weekly, all for the sake of making my author dreams come true, like, this is a huge step for me. But yeah, it just clicked, and now I'm full force in it. It's been 6 months now. So currently I am in the drafting stage of my first novel. That's honestly been the hardest part of this entire journey, because that's the stage that I've always been stuck at, was just writing something and then getting stuck in a cycle of editing and editing and editing and editing, because it just had to be perfect, and forcing myself to finally get past that, and I am just like word vomiting on a page, has been the best development so far in this journey. And that's how I know that this time is different, and this isn't just going to be me jotting stuff down on a piece of paper and putting together a dream and making something out of that dream. This isn't that. This is me making a consistent story, a series. This is going to be a series, and just taking it so seriously, because I can't see myself doing anything else as happily as I would with being a writer. Again, if I died today, I would be highly upset. My ghost would haunt this realm if I did not fulfill this author dream. So that is my ultimate goal. I just want to do what makes me happy, and then whatever comes with that, however else I have to deal with anything else and bills and such, we're gonna have to plan around it. But I'm not going to not do this anymore. I'm not going to put this on the back burner anymore. So I am super excited for you guys to see the influence of this journey of mine in my story. I will get into my current novel in another video, because that is, again, a whole video in and of itself. But so I really appreciate you guys for sticking through this video and hearing about my writing origin story. And I am super excited to continue to write this story with you guys and in front of all of you, and you can keep me accountable and help me stick to this goal, because this means the absolute world to me. But if you have made it this far in the video, please hit that subscribe button so you can see how this former emo teenager / archaeologist / dreamer makes her dreams a reality.